Manchmal sehen Sie Redner, die in Erinnerung bleiben, und einer von denen war Lee Warren, den wir heute hier haben. Auf einer Konferenz, wo ich ihn gesehen habe, hatte er den Titel „Wie Sie schaffen, dass jeder alles macht, was Sie wollen“. Naja, fast. Das Ganze hatte er auf Englisch gehalten vor einem unglaublich schwierigen Publikum, nämlich Menschen, die in der Finanzindustrie arbeiten und dort viele Verkaufstechniken, viele von denen hunderte Tage von Verkaufstraining bereits bekommen haben und eigentlich alles schon mal gehört haben. Und selten habe ich erlebt, dass ein Publikum so begeistert und so beeindruckt war, auch von der Praxisnähe von dem, was dort vermittelt wurde. Ich habe mir Lee Warren dann direkt für ein Interview gesichert. Wir haben ihn heute hier. Das Interview wurde in englischer Sprache durchgeführt. Especially now when it comes to selling, you of course want that your clients don't make too many troubles with you when it comes to putting their goods into your goods into their place. You want to sell properly, and I have an international expert and keynote speaker with us today. Hello and welcome, Lee Warren.
Hi, Niels. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you very much for taking the time. On your website, it says how to persuade anyone to do anything well. Almost. Okay, the well almost made me a bit more calm then, but how is it possible to persuade anyone to do almost anything?
It's a big topic, and the theme of that keynote really is that human beings, we're more similar than we are different in many ways, and quite often it's very easy to focus on our differences. But in fact, in terms of how we think and how we make buying decisions, often humans are fairly predictable. And certainly some of the triggers that activate people, some of the fears that motivate people to move away from things, and some of the things that motivate people to move towards desires tend to be, to some extent, predictable. And so that's why the title of the session that I run is called How to Persuade Anybody to Do Anything Well Almost. And the well almost is there for two reasons. One is, of course, because humans aren't robots, so you can't predict for every single person. But also it's there because quite a key theme of a lot of the work I do with salespeople particularly is that you have to be honest and authentic. And part of being a great salesperson is really being able to see the world from the point of view of your clients and being honest about what your weaknesses are. So I put the actual weakness into the title of the session. It's quite fun, but it's also very honest.
Yeah, okay, excellent. As you know, I'm German, so fun and humor don't work with me. So, so when we have someone, let's say we have the usual sales team, which is now normally their sales process is we visit the client, we shake hands, we have a nice chat together, and then they buy our services, and that is fairly successful. Now we have the situation you can't go on site, you can't meet your clients. Suddenly you're all online and you have to do it anyway. So how, in your opinion, could that still work?
Well, in some ways, Niels, it works better because there are several obstacles in sales traditionally. And one of the big obstacles is what a lot of people call the gatekeeper. So this is, either the person or the system that prevents you from getting to decision makers. And that does not exist at the moment, right? There's nobody there. There are no receptionists stopping you getting through. There's no chains of command stopping you getting to people. So actually, and also it might be changing a little bit, but certainly over the last few months, certainly what I've seen and what a lot of my clients have seen is actually many prospects and other clients being quite keen to take meetings and happy to do it because a lot of what's going on is so boring, and a lot of people are sort of just sat at home and they've got process meetings and so on. But actually it's never been easier to either do a sales presentation or enhance or deepen your relationship with clients. And also nobody now has the excuse that they're not in the office today and can't take your call. So I think there are surprisingly, there are a lot of benefits to our current situation, including, of course, time. I mean, I had a day a few weeks ago when I think, I'm not making this up, I think it was either 11 or 12 sales meetings in one day. And of course, they were all over the internet, and it was great. It was easy, and it didn't take very long. I could never do that, never have done that previously.
That's true. That is true. What, in your opinion, are the most common mistakes salespeople do when it comes to offering their service to other people?
The single biggest mistake salespeople make is not seeing the world from the point of view of their clients and prospects enough. So in terms of offering a product or in terms of offering a service, what most people tend to do, salespeople, is they tend to be too product-led or too service-led. So typically the habit will be talking to somebody about how brilliant the product is or how amazing the service is. And what great salespeople do and truly persuasive people do is they're very, very good at seeing the world from the point of view of the people they're trying to persuade. And they're brilliant at matching their message to what their audience, what their customer or their client needs right at that moment. And a really good analogy, I think, is I mean, sales is sort of like corporate dating in many ways. And if you went on a date and just sat down and told the person opposite you how brilliant you were at dating, and I've been on 12 dates already this month, and I'm amazing at dating, and I've been dating since 1997. The date wouldn't go very well. In a date, you've got to find out about the other person and ask them and create curiosity and enter into a relationship where their needs are being met.
So we're talking about relationships. I know that one of your other specialties is networking. Do you think that we can still do networking in these times? Because let's face it, we can't really meet people, and networking is also about meeting people I do not know. What's your take on that in the current situation?
It's a great question, actually. So clearly, for most of us in the world, we can't do the traditional networking of just speaking to strangers in the same room. Yes. However, we can take many of the things that make that work and we can translate them into online activity. So part of networking obviously is increasing your visibility and increasing your credibility. And you can do a lot of that online. And in many ways, you can do it sort of faster and more cheaply than you can in the real world. So for instance, if you're someone who is good at writing, you can write your ideas out and you can reach thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of people with something you've written. You can do the same with video. So for instance, or indeed a podcast like this. And these are all forms of networking. We might not think of them as traditional networking, but in some ways they're certainly more effective in terms of time. And in some ways they're really quite powerful. Because when you're using, if you like, social media and the online world to connect with people, you can connect with, in one podcast like this, you can connect with 1,000 people who all feel like they have an individual connection to you. It would take you years to do that in the real world.
That is true. What do you think about, and that is a very specific question I received when I prepared for this podcast. Some people now got told by their managers that they should cold contact people on LinkedIn, and that is what they call virtual networking. What do you think about this idea?
I think a golden rule of networking really is build your network before you need it. Right. So if you're connecting with people only because you need something from them, it can often make for a very difficult connection because there's a very old rule in sales, which is people love to buy, but they hate to be sold to. And so if people feel like you're connecting just because you want something, you'll get a lot of negative reaction, and quite rightly, to be honest. So a great way instead to think is, instead of thinking, can I connect with people and can I get something out of people, is to try and think in ways that you can provide value to people and give value to people in some way. And that, of course, requires a little bit more time and thought and effort, but it is in the long run a really terrific way. So I would never send someone a cold message on LinkedIn and just say, hello, you've never heard of me, let's connect. Personally, I think it's a bit rude. But if there was someone I could connect them to, if there was something interesting, or if our fields have an alliance, we have something in common, then I might make reference to that or try and provide them with something that's useful to them.
Excellent. And now, of course, we might have some listeners who are now sitting there listening to this podcast and thinking, wow, that sounds good. It seems to be quite a lot of work. What are Lee Warren's top 3 tips for salespeople in the actual situation we're in?
So the first tip would be stop solving the problems of 2019. If you look at your own website or your own brochure or the kind of stuff you've got used to saying as a salesperson, probably almost all of that messaging and thinking is about solving problems which don't exist anymore. So that leads on to my second tip, which is you have to really understand the problems of your target marketplace, and you have to understand them deeply, not just cosmetically. Because when you do understand those problems, you're able to speak much more directly to your clients. You're able to be much more empathetic with them. And also you become a partner rather than just a salesperson. And the third top tip I would give is get better at articulating what your real value is. I mentioned earlier, far too many salespeople are good at talking about their products or their services, but they're not always good at talking about what the value is of those products or services to other people. So become better at articulating your value.
Excellent. This is brilliant advice. And of course, when some people now might think, some of you may think, well, I'd like to talk to Lee in person. His contact data is in the show notes of this podcast. So get in touch with him directly. And of course, I saw Lee speak at a couple of events. Book him as your speaker for your conference. And now there's only one thing for me left to say. Lee, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. And thank you for some brilliant questions. I really enjoyed it.